I'm Michelle.
I'm Victoria.
I'm Bobby.
I'm Travon.
And although we don't have matching outfits, we're really excited to present to you our findings from our analysis of the Florida East Coast Railway. So first we're going to be discussing the rates from Asia into Florida, and that's 9 different rates. Then we're going to be discussing the insight of the mind of global shippers. Next, we're going to be doing a financial analysis of each of the services from southern Florida into central Florida and the process flow of those shipments. Next, we're going to be doing a break-even analysis of the new investments. And finally, we're going to be discussing which service offering we're determining to implement.
Okay, so throughout the case analysis, we made a bunch of critical assumptions that kind of based our entire analysis around. So first off being that we started off with saying that 3 international 40-foot containers is equivalent to 2 53-foot domestic containers. So that's relevant later on in the case. After that, for the direct route, we decided that there was no real cost associated with moving from Miami to Hialeah. There is for transloading, but in the case of direct, we decided to not include a cost for that. The rate of travel from China to the port of Jacksonville, so there is no explicit rate in the case for that specific route. There was, however, a cost associated with moving from Asia into Savannah. So since they're so close, we decided to use the same rate for both of those options. And for the cost-benefit analysis, since demand is hard to match in regards to how many trucks we wanted to purchase, we decided to go with purchasing 100 trucks, and that will come relevant and make a little more sense down the road. And finally, in regards to the costs of the surcharges, we decided to go with the worst case scenario for all of our analysis. So we matched the trucking costs, the trucking surcharge costs, with also the cost of rail. Which luckily for your guys' specific railroad, it seems you've been able to get 20% reductions in those costs. So all the revenues and profits that we found through our analysis will actually be increased. So we just wanted to do kind of the worst case scenarios to say, this is a very resilient and plausible solution.
So there's currently 9 routes from Asia into central Florida, as are shown over there. And we found through our analysis that from the port of Jacksonville, trucked into central Florida is the best rate for shippers. And these are the base rates for the 9 different routes into central Florida from Asia. And as you can see, the port of Jacksonville is the cheapest. So we didn't have the rate to ship from Asia into the port of Jacksonville, but we did have the rate to ship from Asia into Savannah. And since Savannah is more expensive, it's further away from Asia than Jacksonville is, it's actually more expensive than the rate would be into Jacksonville. So we used that rate into Savannah with the rate from Jacksonville to Central Florida, and that would actually be that is actually even more expensive than what it actually would be with the rate into Jacksonville. Then, since these base rates don't include the fuel surcharges, we did a sensitivity analysis with different fuel surcharges. Currently, the fuel surcharge with the price of gas is at 20%. So we did an analysis for that with the analysis at what it would be if the surcharge was at 17% and what it would be if the fuel surcharge was at 30%. And in conclusion, we found that the rate from the port of Jacksonville into central Florida is the cheapest out of all the 9 rates.
So from the perspective of the shippers, they will have different perspectives depending on the types of commodities that they haul and the service level that people desire. For example, for the commodities that are hauled, if the commodities are perishables and are goods that need to be sent during a certain time, they will have a different perspective from a shipper that don't have a time limit to ship their goods, and also it's also based on the service level that is desired. For the additional considerations, they will have to consider the port labor issues. Since the West is long and ongoing in disputes, they have delayed and disrupted to the West, and so that the shippers will go to the East. And for congestions, because of the delays in the West port, they will have to go to the East because of the little relation and little congestion on the East. For our lead time, it's going to be short, and for port dredging, it will maximize the capacity of our containers. And so, for example, for Panama Canal, from 5,000 TEUs, that's 20 equivalent, to 13,000 TEUs. And also, our rates will also go down as well.
All right, so provided in the case to us were two separate options in which Florida East Coast could use in order to reduce their backhaul. So one of those options being direct movement. So with direct movement, we're essentially looking at the ports at Fort Lauderdale and the Port of Miami. So starting with the Port of Miami, we would go from on rail from Port of Miami to Cocoa Beach. And with this particular movement, that's a $300 charge associated with that, a rate associated with that. And as you can see from Cocoa Beach to Orlando, that's another, that's an actual trucking movement. And there's a $100 fee associated with that, as well as $75 for the backhaul from Orlando back to Cocoa Beach. And then finally, from Orlando up to Jacksonville, that's another rail movement, and that has a $140 charge or rate. Now, all these rates are excluding the fuel surcharge, which we will add in later. And then you've got Fort Lauderdale to the right. The movement from Fort Lauderdale to Cocoa Beach, rail obviously, $295 rate associated with that. And then from Cocoa Beach to Orlando, again, that's a trucking movement, $100 plus $75 for the backhaul. And then from Orlando up to Jacksonville, it's a $140 rate as well. So that's essentially the direct movement option that was presented in the case to us. All right, so to further explain the direct movement, we have presented to you a sort of Excel spreadsheet in order to show you the rates. So we've already gone through the different movements from one location to another. So you see that on your leftmost side, the base rates are included right there. Same thing, just we calculated it out, added it up to get you to that 615 base rate. And in the case, they also provided that 15% of it's already included in that the rate charges that include overhead and your profit margin. So taking that into account, with that base, you get a $92.25 contribution margin. And then, like Michelle said earlier, we conducted a bit of sensitivity analysis, taking different fuel charges, given the base of 20%. So we looked it up. Diesel fuel right now is about $2.45. Given that matrix that we provided, that fell at 20% range. We picked the percentage lower than that at 17, and we picked the percentage higher at 30%, and calculated out how much the surcharge would affect the total shipping cost. And again, you have your contribution margin provided. And then the same exact thing for the route from Fort Lauderdale all the way up to Jacksonville, those contribution margins, total shipping costs, with the surcharges provided to you as well. So the next option that they presented was a transload option. With the transload option, we'd be going from the Port of Miami and then going to the Hialeah facility in order for your international 40-foot containers to be transloaded into the 53-foot containers. So as Bobby mentioned before, you have 3 international 40-foot containers that essentially convert into 2 domestic 53-foot trailers. And so from Port of Miami to Hialeah facility, that's a $70 rate charge. What's not included in that $70 is a $200 transload fee associated with the transloading from international to domestic. So we have that fee included in our numbers presented to you a little bit earlier, but it's not right there. So don't be confused with the $70. It'd actually be $270. And then from Hialeah to Cocoa Beach, rail again, that's a $150 charge. And then from Cocoa to Orlando, as we mentioned before, ground, $100, and then you can follow the chain all the way down.
All right, so you have to bear with me for a little bit. The next few slides are a little bit dry, but they're kind of the key of our analysis. So what this is essentially saying is that we have the rate to transload one container, and we also have the rates to direct one container. So this is kind of showing the difference between the methods. So the difference between the methods is essentially showing that transloading one container has a positive, or is cheaper by $35 and going on up. So we found that there is a significant amount of cost savings by using transloading, and that's just on a per container basis. So adding that up to economies of scale, we found that there'd be a lot of cost savings, and it'd be much more beneficial to use the transloading option. based off our analysis. And that just really goes to show the effect of space efficiency. Just moving down from the 3 to the 2 at the transloading, even though you have a little bit of a gap there with paying for the transload, but it does prove to be a lot more efficient use of space. So for our break-even analysis, this is where it comes into the fact that we're going to have to be expanding the facilities at Cocoa Beach. That's going to be an investment of about $5 million to expand our place at Cocoa Beach. Additionally, we're interested in having a container yard at Cocoa Beach as well. That's going to be about a $100,000 investment. And on top of that, as I mentioned before, we were interested in having about 100 trucking containers that we're going to purchase. And those are about $120,000 a piece. So there's a lot of investment that we're making kind of on the front end here to move forward with the transloading option. But as you can see, the units to break even, so from using direct, you have that amount of break-even units, and then Fort Lauderdale as well. And transloading here, it looks a little bit higher than it should be, but that's because that's using the 40-foot international containers. So the effect of transloading would be have a much lower amount of containers actually utilized to break even for our investment here. So there's a substantial amount that we need of units, containers to break even. But going with the transloading option, it would be much more beneficial to the company in that way. So as mentioned before by Michelle, we found that the most beneficial route, the cheapest route for shippers to use from getting to Asia into Florida was this trucking route through Jacksonville. So we wanted to compare what that price looked like with what our service was going to be providing through rail. So you can see on the side there, on the rightmost side, that the Port of Miami has that cost. And then we went through and detailed the differences and how much cheaper it would be for directing and also transloading. So those two options are presented. So as you can see, you're making a lot more margins off of the transloading of the containers as compared to trucking it. So there's a high cost of trucking it, and we found that there's also a savings with direct. If we were to do the direct option for shippers, there's a savings there, but there's a greater savings in transloading. So then we have a lot of options there. So for implementing all these solutions, there's a lot of things going on here. There's kind of a lot of different pieces to the puzzle. But the first thing is going to be increase the capacity of the Cocoa Beach facility. There's going to be significant investment, as mentioned before, to do this. But we felt that the increased demand from shipments from the west coming over to the east and a lot of different things, and this is going to be a really attractive piece since it's going to be a lot cheaper for shippers to utilize. So the increase in demand is going to definitely overtake that, and I think we'll definitely break even within the first year, even sooner possibly, including the container yard. So one of the things we want to definitely focus on here with using the transloading is we have an extra consideration to think of when utilizing space and going from the 3 to the 2. So things will have to be kind of more tightly worked with our shippers for better utilization. So we aren't wasting the space when we're doing a transload. So that's just kind of mentioned there in the international to domestic conversion. Finally, as I mentioned before, this is a really attractive thing for shippers to use. It's going to be a lot cheaper to get their products and goods into Florida, whether it's from Asia or Europe or even the Caribbean with some of the fruit and citrus products. So it's really attractive, but they have to know about this option and be able to utilize it. So using business-to-business marketing to kind of get the word out about this new service and kind of what are the cost savings going to be to them and kind of why this is going to improve their business. So we're really trying to get to the mind of the shippers here. And finally, in order to decrease some of our backhaul costs from going from Cocoa Beach up to Jacksonville, we want to definitely focus on getting the commerce out of Central Florida. So, as mentioned in the case, it's not as heavy in the commerce out of there, but some of the trucks going up to Jacksonville will be able to get some backhaul. So making sure to utilize as much of those opportunities as possible.
All right, so in conclusion, what we've come to a consensus is that the transloading option would be the best option for us to implement. From the shipper's perspective, you're taking into account your cost as well as the service time or lead time going to different ports, as well as the quality, like Victoria was saying, as well as the product and the best way for you to ship that. We felt like the container yard essentially would definitely reduce the cost of backhaul. With the container yard being at the Cocoa Beach facility, the project we do have coming out of Orlando and up to Jacksonville, that's great for us, great for business. But instead of coming back to Cocoa Beach and taking all your trailers up to Jacksonville with empty backhauls, you can hold those trailers at the Cocoa Beach facility and hopefully get some product that may go back down to the south ports in Miami or Fort Lauderdale. So essentially reducing an unnecessary backhaul there that could put a hole in our pockets. And like we said before, increased interest in the southern Florida ports. That's what we think we'll see as a trend moving forward because of all the issues in the West Coast ports, and especially with the South Florida ports, especially Miami, they're dredged to the point where they can handle the post-Panamax vessels, and so that's great for business as well. So we can accommodate those kind of vessels. We can accommodate the quantity of the volume coming in. So we feel like definitely the South Florida ports is very attractive to these Asian shippers in particular. So with that being said, that concludes our presentation, and we'll open the floor for questions.
When you went to your first slide, are you applying your fuel surcharge to the ocean rate?
This one?
Are you taking the highway and the rail fuel surcharge and applying it to the portion that was the ocean container rate that's embedded?
Yeah, we are.
The Port of Jacksonville is essentially assumed to be the same ocean rate as the Port of Savannah. And so we could assume either Jacksonville, Savannah is going to be close in your economic analysis here as the low cost. So your recommendation is to do the transload because it becomes the cheapest option for the shipper. What I didn't see was the comparison of that transload option to that lowest cost option, which is either Jack Savannah to start with. Did you guys compare that when you
Yeah,
looked at?
so we can go back. So I should have explained this a little bit better. So the option meant by Port of Miami in the sense that that's going to be the cost for Asian shippers to come across and land and get their product to Florida, Central Florida, from the Port of Jacksonville. So that's the cost. So this slide shows the difference between, these are our options.
Okay.
These the options shown here, these are the positive differences of the cost savings to those shippers if they were to choose our option over going with the current trucking option.
VIA Jackson.
Yes.
Okay, great. So you're comparing the lowest to this new one.
Yes.
Last question. In the transload option, we're assuming we're coming in through Miami.
Right.
Your last leg, and by the way, your visual on how the process flow works for the supply chain, your little boxes, is very good. It helps us understand how you're thinking about that flow. But you're taking the box back to Jacksonville. So what was your thought process there around taking that 40-foot box back to Jacksonville?
Transloading. So for the transloading, we're essentially, from my understanding.
Or in the 40-foot, the direct option.
Okay, the direct option.
So we came into Miami, we went up to Cocoa, and then we took the 40 back up to Jacksonville, I think, right? Yeah,
Yes.
that's the slide.
Yes, so with this one, you're going to Cocoa, and then from Cocoa, you have goods that go to Orlando. So that's where the trucking comes into there. And so it's the case data that some goods do come out of Central Florida area.
Okay.
So the rationale with trucks coming back up to Jacksonville is that some of them would actually have goods in them to be able to go up to Jacksonville. Otherwise, they would come back to Cocoa Beach and then come back down on the southbound trains back down to South Florida.
Right. Yeah, so the things mentioned here are the train block. So they get dropped off, and there's that 45-minute lag time when dropping this off here. So that just so you have the trucking option, and then the train continues up to Jacksonville. So it's that kind of that's the movement of the train already. So we couldn't kind of change that in a sense for the direct option. So the train's already moving up there. 6 southbound and northbound each day.
Yeah, with our retaining yard, it would make more sense to hold it there, necessarily be using whether going back up northbound or going down south.
Can you back up a slide or two to your, where it said the cost breakouts on the Excel sheet? Show the profit, the contribution for the, yep.
What?
One more. Keep going. Keep going.
Going the other way.
Yeah.
We went by it, keep
Yeah.
going backwards.
Oh, the contribution.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's the thought process that the contribution margin continues to rise as fuel does? Help me with that.
I think our idea behind that is that essentially, hold on, let me gather my thoughts for a second.
I think the greater the amount that we're charging for fuel, so the higher the fuel costs are, the more that 15% means, because you have a larger sum, because you're charging more for the fuel. So I guess there's a greater rate that you're able to charge that 15% to, so you're getting a larger number there, just because of the rising fuel costs. Because it stated in one of the questions was saying that out of all these rates, we're going to charge, or 50% of that rate is going to be profit and contribution margin. So that was given to us as kind of one of the things for use in analysis. So whether that comes true or based off kind of costs, that's what we were kind of referencing all of this profit margin off of. It's just kind of sucking that out of the rates.
Fuel surcharge is actually taxed at the base rate, so you're not going to increase the base rate and then increase the fuel surcharge. So all the intention of fuel prices go up, the carriers make the whole share in covering its cost of fuel. So there might be a profit margin. Fuel surcharge is higher than the actual cost of fuel going up, but most times it's pretty much equal. But we can't assume the base is going to go up. So that's why I didn't understand the 17, 20, and 30%. But I understand your thinking now.
Oh, I apologize.
How did you come up with 100 trucks for your?
So that was a number. We kind of made that up. Essentially, with the 100 trucks, we didn't want to go too large because the Cocoa Beach facility the 5 million won't go too far. We'll eventually have to expand even more. So we chose a relatively small but large enough number in order to accommodate for new business that may be coming from the West Coast to the East Coast. So essentially there was no hard rationale behind choosing 100, but we wanted something that wasn't too large because our facility couldn't handle it. But we wanted something that was considerable, giving new business opportunities.
It's a $120,000 asset. It's a lot of money. And you take into consideration very short distance between Cocoa and Orlando, so the truck can make multiple trips a day, not just hauling one container back.
But so yeah, you bring up a really good point in regards to kind of with the expansion, it's going to be kind of a slower process. So it's not going to be immediately rolled out. We're not going to purchase the 100 trucks, on day one. So kind of, we wanted to see kind of how the demand increased from Asia and kind of how these different things increase. So those purchases would kind of come over time. And if we found that, we got to a certain point and we could kind of meet the demand with the trucks that we already had in place, then we definitely wouldn't kind of just, superficially buy, those extra 50 or 60 trucks that we kind of had matching. So it's going to be a slower process of kind of building that over periods, over a quarter. Maybe we purchase, 4 or 5 trucks a quarter or something like that to see how demand is matching with that. So kind of working with our suppliers as to kind of what they're going to be asking us and kind of how we can meet that with the truck. So, yeah.
And one last question. And your rate of, you said it would have an ROI in 1 year, or you would
Break even.
Break even in 1 year on that level of capital investment, $5 million, 100,000, and then another 12 million. How did you calculate that?
So our break-even analysis. So sorry, ignore the dollar signs on the side. It's just in units of containers. So this is assuming this is the amount of containers that it would take. So whether that's within a year or longer, we didn't really have a good way of measuring that effectively. So we just wanted to show the units. So if we meet this demand and meet these container amounts, it could be within a year, it could be 2 years. We didn't really have a good metrics throughout the case, just kind of seeing what that demand would be and what that, how many containers we'd be able to pull in for that year. So as you mentioned, it is a large capital investment, so it could be within 1 or 2 or 3 years, seeing kind of what that payback period is going to be on the investment.
And that's almost half of the total current volume.
Of the whole railroad?
That you're saying half, it would increase, or half of that would have to go to the land. You're saying 185,000 containers or units would be going to Orlando, but they only moved 400,000 total, everywhere in the state. Salesforce needed to do that.
We tried to, we pulled those numbers from we were trying to use the exhibit with the latent TVUs out of each and every port. I don't know if we lost something in translation, but what we essentially did, we took the gross, the market share, I guess, for each particular port, and then we divided that by we calculated into the 40, given the 40-foot containers, so we divided each of those by, was it two?
Yeah, the contribution margin.
Yeah.
So it took the investment, the capital investment, you took the capital investment and divided that by the contribution margin for the different things. So the direct, the Fort Lauderdale direct, and the transload. So taking those contribution margins and dividing by the overall investment. That's how we came to those numbers.
And we're out of time.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Great job.